housing grounds, you're not allowed to go back to housing. So I didn't have no place to go. I'm 48. It's kind of no money, never had a job before prior to now. So the thing is, so what do I do? So in order to get out of prison, I had to have a housing area. So they afforded me a three-quarter housing. And I remember sitting at the intake, me and some other guy, and we was hoping, please take us in, please take us in. And we both got in, and I remember the guy, after about a week or so, start complaining like, oh, they don't got enough toasters, yo, they should have 3 or 4 TVs, you know,
So,
he lost.
so it seems like there's a lot there, and I just wanted to know if we could, I'm over here. I just wanted to know if we can give them an opportunity to respond to the first question that you asked, to give the panel an opportunity to respond to that question.
Oh, can I just finish?
Sure.
Okay, and you can have all the time. So I'm just recalling, and so I think he just misdirected his focus, okay? Because I remember being there, and it was safe, it was sanitary and secure. That was the main things I recall. However, you know, some of the individuals are unsanitary because they had a clean environment. It's just that if you go use the bathroom and don't clean up after yourself, then it becomes unsanitary. But they afford you that. I recall.
I am going to need to cut you off, though, just to share the space a little bit more. Tasha wants to respond to what you're
so
saying.
can I just hit on one issue then? Before? Okay, so she said, Ms. Tanya Kessler said about jobs, you can't have a job. So I remember being in a program, and they afford you different hours. So if you have a job, then they give you hours that's late after work, you know. So it's not like if you don't go at this time, they put you out. I don't recall that.
So you're talking about your personal experience, and we did try to explain in the report that there is a range of experience, and in fact, some people, have had some good experiences, but that doesn't negate the fact that there are a lot of people who had bad experiences. I think you're rightly pointing to the fact that other residents are also contributing to the experience that people have in living in three-quarter houses, which I think we can appreciate.
To answer your question about, to respond to your question about living in a housing, and let me just talk about my personal experience, because you said a lot and I kind of got lost, but I did feel you when you were saying that you was in a house and it was all good, and then you had other residents. I was living in a three-quarter house. It was an excellent three-quarter house. But when I came home from work, they said we had to leave because another house got shut down, and they turned the female facility into a male facility. Then what? I had to start all over again. If I was a weak person, then I would have went to the left and went back to my criminal life. But I made a conscious decision that I wanted to change my life, and by the grace of God, I continued on to live a positive life no matter what came in front of me. Some people, are not that strong, and then they go to the left and they do things. So it's not about that the three-quarter house is a bad thing and the people that live in it, but there's some people that take a house and then they just allow people to be overcrowded. Not all three-quarter houses bad. I had 2 experiences. One was good, but then until they illegally evicted me. And then the other one was horrible because the manager was on drugs and extorting us and taking our money, but I knew that I want to stay in school and I need to keep this job, and I was walking in a life of spirituality at the time. But if I didn't have that, I would have lost it all. So we're not here saying that three-quarter houses are bad. We just trying to find regulations where structure can be set in place. And I've also seen people that came into the first three-quarter house, they were drunk, they got certain sanctions, they got in trouble. And then they wouldn't leave, but they would refer them to detox. and then they'll come back and get another chance. But the only thing that went wrong with that three-quarter house was the legal eviction. But the regulations was pretty good, the structure. I loved it there. We had our own room. It was like set up in a little apartment space. You had your own room. It was all good. Like, we had cable. But the thing was this, they illegally evicted us, and they was forcing us to go to a program.
Tasha, thank you. Thank
Okay.
you very much.
Thanks.
So you, and then I promise this side.
Really quickly, my name is Liz Brown. I'm from State Senator Liz Kruger's office. Was your study able to locate these outside of the city at all in the rest of the state? And then secondly, what role could the state take? Because we've talked a lot about the city, and I'm just wondering, how the state can come in, if at all.
I can speak to the first part, which is, no, we didn't focus on any houses outside of the state, and I don't know much about, or in other areas of the state. I don't know much about it, but I do know that in Suffolk County there have been some efforts to deal with what they call sober homes in that area, to bring them under some sort of oversight, and I don't know a whole lot about that, but it may be something the state might want to look into and to see how that county's doing that.
And
Okay.
if I could just add one other thing about the role the state can play is that the New York State Office of Alcoholism and Substance Abuse Services has oversight of the outpatient programs and also oversight of inpatient programs that make a lot of referrals to three-quarter houses. And so, certainly OASIS could be regulating referrals and could be also sort of looking closely at what the outpatient programs are doing and their connections with the three-quarter houses.
And related to that, Medicaid fraud is part of what's been talked about here. And there's an Office of the Medicaid Inspector General. And it sounds like this is a place to pay attention.
Thank you. Okay, please. Oh, you have a mic. Okay, I'm sorry I didn't see you.
Hello, my name is Baron Graham, and I'm a program manager with the After Hours Project. I've made a lot of referrals to three-quarter houses. And I heard y'all speaking about Medicaid and Medicaid fraud, but there's also another element that goes on in three-quarter houses because they also look for people who's on SSI and SSD because that's basically money coming in, and they charge them more money to stay in a three-quarter house. I deal with a three-quarter houses that people go in and they have to be a part of a program. And then I also deal with three-quarter houses that they don't have to be a part of a program. But what's I find to be strange is that I've dealt with individuals that I've sent to three-quarter houses. They were already on an outpatient program, and because they didn't want to leave the program they was at, they was told to leave. You know, they accepted them in, and then after they didn't want to be a part of that program or the outpatient program that they refer clients to, they didn't accept them, or they sent them back to me, and I had to find other accommodations for them. But as long as those three-quarter houses are able to pull in revenue from SSI and SSD, they're really not going to be mad about Medicaid fraud, because they found another element of income that they can get money from. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now, the woman in the right, thank you.
Hi, my name is Eva Koditz, and I used to work with a program that was the Welfare to Work program up in the Bronx. And we got referrals from HRA and substance abuse, basically. And many of them lived in the three-quarter home. And they were horrible, and we thank MFY for helping us so much with our clients. One of the things that, pardon me? Oh, okay. One of the things I think is really important is that people don't have enough money to afford better than three-quarter homes. They don't have enough money once they complete their substance abuse treatment and get kicked out of a three-quarter home to get into some sort of living place, a place with a decent place. And they're not they don't get work opportunities or work training that will get them anything more than a minimum wage someplace. And that's not going to afford housing in New York City. It's a hoax. It's ridiculous. And the city actually prohibited us from referring people to three-quarter houses after a while because they're illegal and they're not good. But these people couldn't get jobs that paid any more than $7 something an hour. So, it doesn't provide opportunity, and it's a sham. It's ridiculous. So I think what we ought to do is somehow get involved with FIA, the Family Independence Administration, or whatever it's called. And again, to your point, it's family. It's not individual. And I think that this is an issue about individuals, too. I'm a single individual who lives in a very small apartment. And I don't love it anymore, and I've lived there for 30 years or something, and I'd like to move on too, but that's the way it is.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Nadia Sadlowski. I work for the DOE Fund, specifically the Ready Building Enabled Pathways Program. Hi, Norma. When listening to this and kind of capitalizing on what you were saying about OASIS, I do think that parole should have a stake in this meeting as well. When you talk about who has to gain financially, if you cut off referral sources, you will impact the ability of these places to operate. And parole is a huge referral source, especially because they can't release people to the shelters anymore. They can only release them to an address. So I think in working with the parolees and working with the parole officers I think they would be interested in getting involved with this, because for a parole officer, it's a nightmare when the guys get thrown out of the three-quarter housing. It's on them to work with the parolees to then try and find another three-quarter housing. So I really think that, if we were to talk about a coalition, I do think that community supervision has a place in that coalition. Thank you.
Yeah, I totally agree. My comment about parole is not to say they don't have a role. I think absolutely, in terms of coming up with a solution, that docs should be at the table. But we just want to be careful about not having an unintended consequence of resulting in longer incarceration for people.
Okay. I just want you to know that we are talking to parole, and they're very interested in this. But I kept expecting Joanne to jump up and go, yes, and the countervailing argument is that then the people would be sitting in prison waiting to get out. So this is a complicated, kind of raw issue that so many different systems abut to, and that we, in taking this on, wanted to do it in a very careful kind of, careful cutting kind of way, so that we don't end up making more of a mess than the one that we're trying to fix. That said, Tracy, this is your turn.
You just said what I wanted to say.
Oh, well, say it better.
I'm just going to say it again. I'm Tracy Gardner with Legal Action Center, and we work on criminal justice, addiction, and HIV issues. So we're kind of staked out in all of these issues, and we are so delighted to be working with Anne and MFY and Neighbors Together, because this is, and of course, Joanne Page, all hail. The issue is what Anne spoke to, which is the sensitivity with which we approach and talk about this issue. The tendency for the city or state approach to completely shut down these resources was one that we did not want to incentivize. And so the gentleman that spoke about the opportunities that are coming up, I think really we should look very much at a glass half full approach versus the glass half empty, where the approaches were much more draconian. I would like to add that health is also what's connecting people, and housing as a role in stabilizing health. There's this little thing called Obamacare that's coming up, and there is a recognition in New York that when people are not stably housed, they become sicker, more expensive, and so we're looking at collateral consequences. The mass imprisonment and the after effect of our incarceration and drug policies is that we have more people with criminal records, with unaddressed mental health, behavioral health issues, who need not just housing, but primarily housing and other supportive services. and let's not be fooled at all, and this is with great love to housing coalition partners, but the contempt and disdain for people with criminal records and people struggling with addiction and mental health issues is deep, and it's profound, and it means that there will need to be an open-mindedness on all sides, not just with our policymakers, but also with us, among us as coalition partners to approach this issue. You have to be open. Thank you.
So I'm
Thank
waiting
you.
because there's someone here from Oasis that wanted to
Oh,
share.
good.
Hi, everybody. My name is Sharon Davis. I'm from Oasis. And
Can
we
you
have-
talk more directly
sorry.
into the mic?
We have been conducting a number of investigations in response to the relationship between sober homes and treatment programs. Oasis does have regulatory oversight over treatment programs, but we don't over the sober homes. One of the things that we will look at when referrals are made, we're looking at the fact that cookie cutter approaches are being made when clients are referred to those types of treatment programs because they're in that type of housing. And Oasis will go in and we will look at treatment plans, we will look at level of care determinations that are being made, and that information can be referred on to OMIC, Department or Medicaid, for investigation, because we found that those types of providers are those providers that are getting the maximum amount of dollars for Medicaid reimbursement, because they have people coming into their programs or they're attending treatment 7 days a week. And some of the stuff that you talked about, we're very much familiar with, and we're very much aware of who those providers are, but we don't have any oversight over the sober homes. How do we get this information? We're really relying upon you as providers or people, community partners, to let us know who's doing what, because oftentimes we don't know. And the way that when we do get the information, investigators are going out and we're taking a look at that information.
So thank you for saying that, and thank you for that work. We're glad you're doing that. And then I'm sitting here, you know, thinking, well, what's the unanticipated consequence of that? Will be that only people, now the additional eligibility for living in a three-quarter house will be if they can meet the standard of care kind of issue or level of care issue that Oasis is going to be looking at, because part of the problem here is that it's not a viable economic model, is it? I mean, 215 times the number of bedrooms in a house isn't going to pay the rent, let alone the whatever. So by definition, it has to be crowded or overcrowded, but I think that in some places, even that wouldn't make it a profitable business for someone. That it is, if indeed there are kickbacks, and there's lots of indication that there is very likely a system of that, that's what makes it a lucrative kind of investment. So isn't it a fascinating social problem that we get to be working on together? Who else? We have like 3 more minutes. Who else had a burning share? We can take one from each side of the room. Okay.
My name's Jill Hamburg. I work at Empire State College, which is part of the State University of New York. I'm an urban planner, and this problem goes way back. Back in the 1960s, the City Council put a moratorium on conversion of SROs to other uses. And out of that, they had to have a report called the Blackburn Report. I wrote the code section of that, the Building and Zoning Code. And Tony Blackburn asked me to include something on illegal SROs. This is in the 80s. Out of that, we met with city agencies. Didn't get anywhere. Fire was interested, others were, but city planning wouldn't budge because it's multiple. There are about 7 or 8 different regulations that have to change to create safe and legal housing at the low end for singles. But then what happened was somebody at the city council, a staffer, got together a group of people, and we developed a draft legislation to make possible SROs, that is not just smaller places, but shared services, shared bathrooms and kitchens. And I was wondering if you were aware of that, and if there was any movement on trying to work with that to go further. That's the first. And the second is, people have raised the issue of the 215. As far as I know, that has not been increased since 1988. That's how long it's been. For families, the HRA rate went up, but for singles, it did not. The basic grant also hasn't gone up very much. So aside from coalitions dealing with housing, are there opportunities to work on the issue of the housing allowance for public assistance recipients in single households?
Thank you.
I don't know anything about the housing allowance, so I can't speak to that. I mean, in terms of trying to press for housing regulatory reform, the issue you're talking about is dead and buried. And frankly, we could barely get consensus in Community Board 6 for a building of micro-unit apartments. They voted it down. This is a community, by the way, that 60% of the people who live there are single people with a median household income for single people of $105,000. So, I mean, I don't even know what to say, you know? So when you then start to talk about trying to target, I mean, we're trying to target regulatory reform. Whether things get subsidized or how they get subsidized is a secondary issue. First, you got to be able to have the regulatory framework to even let this type of housing exist. We are not there yet. And we get a huge amount of pushback. I mean, I usually, when I talk about our making room work, I usually start with a slide from like the old Frankenstein movie where people are coming with the torches and pitchforks, because that's pretty much what we get. On the other hand, and this is, again, I go to the point of the woman in the back, mostly from housing advocates, by the way. When we did the exhibition at the museum, we had 150,000 people come, and they loved it, they were engaged, they were interested. The housing advocacy world is not quite with us. It's not. I'm just going to say that. It's not. And so when I say we need to build those bridges, it's not because I have some Pollyanna view, because I agree with the comment in the back that when you talk about singles, there's a huge demonization. When you talk about singles with an incarceration history, I mean, forget it, right? So until we think about community development in a different way, and until we recognize that, like, we have met the enemy and they are us, I mean, you know, like, where do they think people come from? Who belongs in a community? I mean, come on. So we're not there yet, and so the regulatory piece is suffering. The regulatory reform is being impacted by that.
So I'm very inclined, both because of the time and because I think that's a great place to end, to let that be the last word. If I falsely advertised to somebody over here that they got to talk, I want to apologize. But we try to keep our commitments as it relates to time. So I want to again thank Robert and Tasha and all of the research assistants for the work that they did to make this report possible. Our partners, MFY and Neighbors Together and Legal Action Center. And I want to particularly thank the panel today. Joanne and Geraldine, thank you for joining us for this discussion, and thank each of you for being here with us.
Thank you.